Hey everyone, this is Jason from Som Travel Eats, and tonight on Dinner and Drinks, we've got some really nice pork meatballs, little non-traditional method that Nana wouldn't necessarily approve of. We've got some really nice red wine. We've got some artichoke pesto that's going to go on top of our gluten-free pasta. So let's get into it. Tonight on the drinks portion, which is sometimes the most important portion of this, we've got a wine from Mauro Sebaste. And now get ready for a mouthful. Let's pronounce this together. Costemonghisio. That's a mouthful. Not to say that most Italian words and wines aren't already. The most difficult region in all of the world when it comes to wine, in my opinion, and I think a lot of other Soms will agree with you, is Italy. France, rules are straightforward. Everything is easy to understand. America, you've got AVAs. You've got grapes, names, varietals. Everything is set in stone by the book. But for some reason, the Italian world of wine is just the wild, wild west. And there are so many varieties of grapes and singular varieties of grapes that have 10 different names to them. So it is definitely a mouthful. And it's one of those regions where you can never study it enough. There's always a lot to learn. So I'm constantly on the hunt for new wines and for new things to come out of Italy because, like I said, there's a lot of knowledge there. So with this wine tonight, this is actually from the Piedmonte region in northern Italy, and mostly the Barbera di Asti grape is going to come from that region. Now, it's grown in other areas throughout Italy, it's grown in other areas throughout the world as well, but this particular area is what's best known for this particular grape. This body or this structure of this wine, it's a medium body. It's got a very nice full mouthful feel. The tannins on here are very soft and very round. And when you think of Barbera di Asti, you think of sour cherries. So just immediately on the nose, you get that sour cherry note. You get some really ripe red fruits like some raspberries and some strawberry, but it's super bright. There's a lot of acidity here. Really, really good body. That's a really good wine. A lot of sour cherries. Actually gonna take a sip of that. Excellent wine. So the way that this is produced is all biodynamic. I've actually been to the producer's facility here. They're so nice, absolutely just so welcoming. Family-run company, owned and operated. And if you're ever in the area over there, I would definitely suggest that you pop in and visit them because they're absolutely amazing. So this is the 2015 vintage. Alcohol content here is 15%. What's really great about this brand in particular, even though I bought this bottle from Italy back with me, Total Wine does a direct-to-consumer or wine-to-consumer. So you can actually get Mauro's wines right in the local Total Wine. So awesome, it's a win-win. We've got some gluten-free pasta going in the back. Just gonna take a look. And we've got a really nice al dente here. So I'm gonna cut the heat off on that. And I'm gonna get this drained. And this is gonna go with our artichoke pesto. Perfect. And then we're gonna make some pork meatballs. So let's get the pesto going. So what I've got in here already is I've grinded up some artichokes, and I've got some garlic, and I started it with a little olive oil and some of the water that the artichoke itself was in the jar. And you can just grab these out of the jar, it's super easy. And then what I'm gonna add to that is just a little bit of grated onion. And the reason that I'm grating it is I just want some of that nice onion flavor, but I don't want a lot of chunky pieces in there because I want this to remain kind of smooth. So I've got about a tablespoon's worth of grated onion in there. And then I'm gonna come in with a little crushed red pepper flakes, just to give it a little heat. And then to further on a little bit of a smokiness so that it pairs really well with this wine, I'm gonna take just a little bit of some smoked hot paprika. And then, I can smell that already, I've got a little bit of black pepper. And of course, just a little bit of kosher salt. Now, grab the lid and give this a couple good pulses. So we're going to give this a couple good pulses. And I've got this one set to puree, and all depends on how you like the consistency of your artichoke. Before I add any more olive oil, I'm just going to give this a little taste, make sure that we're good on seasoning. Needs a little more salt, pepper, and then I've got the red pepper flakes hitting me already. I'm going to add my fresh basil, and I've got about a cup worth of basil. And these basil leaves from the garden are a little bit smaller, so you can kind of eyeball it based on the size of your basil leaves. And then I'm just going to add just a touch more of salt. I get a little hint of smokiness from the paprika. Then take some of my extra virgin olive oil, and as this is running, I'm just going to pour a little bit of this right in. Perfect. So we've got a really nice kind of creamy consistency here. The artichokes have started to break down. Some of that basil's in there. That's really, really refreshing. And it's really clean. That's great. A little bit different than, you know, traditional tomato sauce. So we've got that. We're ready to roll. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get in on our pork meatballs. So this is non-traditional pork meatball, or I should say non-traditional meatball in general, because normally, well, again, I don't want to say normally, depending on how you make your meatballs, you could use pork, veal, you could use beef, you could do a combination of all of them together. You could use real breadcrumbs from day-old stale bread chopped up and toasted. You could use prepackaged breadcrumbs. You could use gosh, what else goes in here? Milk. A lot of people use whole milk in there. You could use eggs as some binders. There's so many different ways and different recipes to make meatballs. This is just one of them that we're going to do tonight. And my meatballs, they never are the same because I never have same access to the same ingredients. So things are constantly changing and evolving. But if it was Sunday dinner and I wanted to sit down and wanted to have a real good traditional Nana's meatball, we'd go pork and veal with a little beef. And that'd be the way to go. And then we'd go down the very traditional method. So what I'm going to do here to maintain some moisture is I'm actually going to grate on the larger size. I've got a half a zucchini here, and I've got 1 pound of pork inside the bowl over there. And I've got this on the larger size of the 2 grates. And just be careful when you get down to the edge of this, that you don't chop those fingers, because it's happened and it's not fun. All right. So I'm gonna toss that zucchini right in here, and I want to leave all of that moisture in there because that's going to help keep these meatballs moist. And then I'm going to chop my onion up. So that, remember the same method that we talked about in the last one. I've got the root still on the onion. I've got the onion cut in half, so I've got a nice flat surface to work on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my knife through the top about 3/4 of the way back, and I'm going to run it through one more time because I want a more smaller size dice. And then I'm just going to put the knife in just to the back of the root at about, I'd say, 1/4 of an inch size. And then fingers away from the blade, nice size dices of onions. And there we go. So now you've got a nice, consistent onion dice. And we'll get those into the party. Perfect. And anything more than a half onion on there would have been too much. You could have even used just a single shallot if you wanted to. Then what I've got over here is I took just the half of a red pepper, just a small little sliver of it, and I took 2 San Marzano tomatoes, just to give some really nice acidity in the whole blend. And then using my knife, now a really large traditional size chef knife would work really well here. You want to keep the tip of the blade down, and I'm just going to kind of do this rocking motion to get a really nice fine chop on those tomatoes and on those that red bell pepper, because I really just want everything to kind of break down nice. And these are so soft, and there's so much moisture content in here anyway from the tomato that a lot of this is going to break down, but it's just good to have it in a nice edible size so that you're not stuck with this odd looking bell pepper sticking out the side of your meatball. All right, so we've got that, and you can see we've got a really nice small chop on that. Perfect. Now the last thing I'm gonna do, second to last thing, we're gonna season, and then we're gonna add our, breadcrumbs. So I've got a couple handfuls of salt in there. I've got some black pepper. And I'm gonna take probably about a 1/4 cup of breadcrumbs. And these are Alia's Love of Artisan Food Italian breadcrumbs, and they're gluten-free, dairy-free. So these at the Whole Foods store, at the food market, wherever you're shopping, pick up any kind of gluten-free breadcrumbs. And then I'm just gonna incorporate everything together and get a really nice, it's like I said, non-traditional meatball. And then in the traditional sense of meatballs, I'm just gonna kind of get in there with my hands and work everything together. So I want everything to combine nice. We may end up having to season this again. But what's always good when you're making meatballs, especially if you're making a large batch of meatballs, take a small, and I learned this from Jada, take a small little piece and stick it in a frying pan, let it cook down, and taste it. I mean, because you obviously can't taste the raw pork, but that's a good way to gauge the flavor of your meatballs without having to worry, are they seasoned? So it's a good way if you're doing it for a large group of people. I mean, if you're Nana and you're in the kitchen and you're feeding 13 people, the last thing you want to do is have somebody complain there's not enough salt in your meatball. Not that that would happen to Nana, because her meatballs are perfect. So that's that. All right, we've got all this incorporated. So this is coming together nicely. And there's still a lot of moisture in here, which is really good because we're not using milk and I don't have any eggs in here. And unfortunately, I know it's blasphemy, but I don't have any cheese. So again, trying to be a little bit more dairy-free focused here. So that's good. And then I'm just gonna start making my meatballs. And you could go any size that you want on these meatballs. The size is just going to determine how long it takes them to cook. So if you want them a little bit larger, if you want them a little bit smaller, it's totally up to you. You know, I'm the worst gauge at weight, but if I had to say, these are probably 4 or 5 ounces meatballs. So we're just gonna put some of these together. And you can see all those ingredients starting to come through in the meatball. These are going to be really good. And then I've got my oven preheated to 400 degrees for these guys. There's just a little too much there. guess it also depends on how many people you're feeding. You know, if it's just 2 of you, like it is here, 3 or 4 of these with the pasta, that's gonna be more than enough to make sure that everybody's full. And they're not super heavy because there's not a lot of breadcrumbs in here. There's just enough to kind of keep it together as a binder. So I think we're gonna get, I got 6, probably gonna get maybe 9 meatballs out of this. We'll try to. I think just gonna be shy, but we'll see. Yeah, it worked out nicely. I'm gonna borrow a little bit from Peter over here. Get that going. So, there you go. We've got our pork meatballs, and the fat content on here was 80-20. So we've still got a good amount of fat. This was just a ground pork. All right, so I'm gonna get my hands washed, and then we'll get those in the oven. All right, guys, so for our pasta, we've got our meatballs in the oven, and I've got the heat on my pan. This is starting to come up nicely. Our artichoke pesto is all finished. I added another drizzle of olive oil in here just because it was starting to kind of get a little dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of that artichoke pesto, and I'm going to get that into the pan, and then I'm going to just wait for it to start to heat up. And once it starts to come up to temperature, then I'm going to toss in my pasta. So I just kind of want to move this around. Now, for the pasta, after this came out of the water, I drizzled a little olive oil on it just to make sure that it doesn't stick. So you can see it's got a really nice glisten to it. And that's from the olive oil. So this is going to start to come up to temperature. And then I have a half cup of vegetable stock that I'm going to start to incorporate a little bit of this just so that it starts to thin out a little bit more of that pesto, because as you can see it's kind of thick, and I don't want to add too much olive oil because then it just becomes very greasy. So this is already starting to come up, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of that vegetable stock. And kind of move everything together. Looks really good. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of that stock. Now it's starting to get the consistency that I want, just a little bit thinner, just so that it kind of coats all of that pasta. A little bit more. This actually is looking good. I'm not going to use, well, let's just go ahead and we'll finish it off. So that was the full half cup. Probably could have gotten away with a quarter cup of that. And I'm going to lower my heat down. And now I want to just use the sauce to bring the heat back up for the pasta. So, I'm going to grab enough pasta for my 2 servings. And you want to try to give that pasta a turn, because you don't want to break the spaghetti. Just kind of move it around in the sauce. So we got some really nice coverage on all of our pasta, and we're good to go. So now once our meatballs get finished, we'll pull them out, we'll get it plated, and we'll be good to go. All right, guys, so meatballs are done. Pasta is done. We're gonna get this plated up and we're gonna eat. So we got a nice twirl on our pasta. Get that positioning going. Scott Conant does this much better than I do, but he's the pasta pro. And see, it just falls every time I try to do it. Gotta watch more of him. All right, we got our pasta, we'll grab our meatballs. Oh yeah, I know you can see that. Those are good looking meatballs. Perfect. I'm just gonna slap 2 of these bad boys right in there. Just got a little fresh basil for the garnish. Come back and hit this one ready to eat. A little salt and pepper just on the topping. And there you go. So we've got our artichoke pesto pasta. We've got our pork meatballs, and I'm ready to eat. So like, subscribe, bring your appetite, and I'll see you next time.